Blog Talk Radio.
And good evening. This is your standard few seconds you always get to refresh your browsers, refresh your ears, and refresh your minds. All you wonderful hospital porters sitting there at home in front of your radio sets. And as for you worthless civilian scum, I suppose you can keep listening if you must.
You're listening to Critical Mass Radio. Now it's our turn.
Hospital Porters, pride and dignity. Stop the New World Order. Welcome to Hpanwo Radio.
CMR Critical Mass Radio in association with We All Change Manchester and Freedom Northwest. Please note the views and opinions expressed by the hosts on this show are not necessarily the views held by the station. CMR is for people who want answers, because now it's our
And welcome to Programme 18 of Hpanwo Radio. Hpanwo stands for Hospital Porters Against the New World Order. Tune in for all the latest news, views and reviews from the world of government cover-ups, ghosts, UFOs, hospital porters, paranormal investigation, hidden knowledge, forbidden history and archaeology, chemtrails, and more hospital porters. I am Ben Emlyn-Jones, and this show is intended to be a companion to the Hpanwo blog and Hpanwo TV YouTube channel. That song was Dominion Mother Russia by Sisters of Mercy. Very gothic rock, you know. People making jokes about us being middle-aged. Well, you see, I just like songs from the 80s, and that was actually from the 90s, I think, that one, anyway. But the vocalist always reminds me of my woodwork teacher at school. That's always what I remembered. His name was Mr. Downer. Now, I thought they were a German band, but actually they're English, and they come from Leeds. But they played in Germany a lot. You know, that's how they started out, just like the Beatles did in their early years. Well, this is Programme 18 of Hpanwo Radio. We're at the age of 18 now. So in radio show terms, we can consume alcohol legally. Someone should actually take us out for a drink. That's a hint, by the way. Mine's a pint of Stella. Well, tonight on Hpanwo Radio, we have Ross Hemsworth, who's an author, television and radio broadcaster, and lecturer on conspiratorial and paranormal subjects. He presented Ghost Detectives and Ghost Watch Alive. The Ghost Detectives was for Channel 4 programme, and Ghost Watch Alive was with the BBC. Later on, he became independent, and he produced and presented the show Now That's Weird. And today, he presents The Hammer Show, which is a radio show. Also, we have some ghostly goings-on in an Oxford church recently, petrol produced from water and air, and parts of the moon to be declared out of bounds. What's more, we have an awful lot. Space weather's coming up, and I'll tell you what, I've got an awful lot to tell you about space weather. It's been a very, very busy sort of week in those terms. First of all, though, we're going to have Kevin Annett. He's our second guest. He's only going to be on for a short time, but he has an important update to give us in his pursuit of justice for the massive number of victims of church and state-sponsored child abuse and genocide. But before that, we're just going to have a wee bit of Danny Wilson. And that last song was Mary's Prayer by Danny Wilson. It's a great song. And it's actually not by a man, but by a band. Danny Wilson are actually a band of Glasgow buskers. And none of them are named Danny Wilson, incidentally. Right, I think we have Kevin Annett on the line. Let's see what we can do. I'll just add him to the conference call. Hello, Kevin. Hello, Kevin. So it always takes a couple of minutes. Hello, Kevin.
Hi, Ben.
Hi, Kevin. You're on Hpanwo Radio. How are you?
I'm doing fine.
It's good to hear from you again. Now, you have an important update, I believe, in your case against the ITCCS trial.
I do, yeah. There's a couple of really important things. First of all, for people in England to know that as if you've been following our website, itccs.org, you'll see that our main body of evidence is going up online November 1st. And what is really encouraging is in the last couple of weeks, we've had probably at least another dozen people in England come forward to volunteer as citizen jurors. So I know that in a number of cases this was in response to the fact that I had been, that there was attempts to bar me again from England, that there had been other attempted sabotage of the work we're doing. So people are really responding, and it's encouraging, especially since in our second round of cases, let me explain, the first round here in the fall, we're dealing with the genocide in Canada, but in the second round, in the new year, in the spring, we're going to be focusing on broader international issues, including Ireland, the Crimen Solicitanis policy in the Catholic Church, covering up child abuse and that kind of thing. So it's really been encouraging how people have been rallying around all of this.
Great, yeah, because this is an international phenomenon that covers the entire world, and as everyone has to understand that. The same policy was introduced in almost every country where there are churches and children, basically.
Very much, Ben. For example, just today I got another bunch of documents from people in Ireland showing that for many years, when the deaths at the Magdalen laundries were being discovered by the Catholic Church, they had a policy of officially silencing people with bribes and threats and other things. That's all coming out now in documents signed by cardinals in Ireland. The same kind of stuff went on in England, of course, and so this is all coming out. Another thing that's encouraging is last week on Iranian television, they mentioned the genocide in Canada. They quoted our work and our website, and a lawyer in Canada actually talked about how Canada should be brought before International Human Rights Court. So, the old adage that the enemy of our enemy is our friend, Iran was recently, it had its diplomatic relations severed by Canada at the order of the Americans. So, this kind of thing tends to blow back on the people responsible.
Yeah, there's a lot of good things are coming out of Iran at the moment, like the Press TV channel and things like that, where you get there's a lot of information on that channel that's not present on any other channel. And I'm encouraged by this myself, Kev. I'm not sure if you're aware, but there's recently been a massive scandal in this country involving a famous TV personality who died recently, Jimmy Savile. This is not related to the church, but it is related to the BBC, which is one of the world's premier media organizations, and basically they're going through the worst crisis of their history right now, because everything seems to be coming out in a domino-like effect. That this man had a 50-year career with the corporation. He was one of the most treasured assets, and he was basically there was a massive group of people around him who were either looking away subconsciously, or the solicitor who was representing the victims is actually saying that there is a paedophile ring at the BBC, and there was a lot of deliberate cover-up and collusion with this man, Jimmy Savile.
I understand he's connected to the so-called royal family as well.
Very much so. In fact, he's been knighted by the Queen, and he's a close friend of the Prince of Wales. And this is another thing. This hasn't come out on the TV show yet, but hopefully it will. But he was a regular visitor at the infamous Haute de la Garenne Children's Home on Jersey. Right. I'm sure you've heard of that.
Yes, I have, yeah.
The bones they found in the basement, just like the schools in your country.
That's right. Well, your listeners also might like to know that last January, the Archbishop of Canterbury in London, Rowan Williams, told the head Anglican Church official in Canada that he had to cover up this evidence that was coming out at the site where we conducted an archaeological dig last year, the Mohawk School in Brantford, because there's documents showing that the Church of England ordered that the school be used as a way to get rid of the last of the Mohawks, documents signed in 1870. Now, he ordered, this is a direct obstruction of justice coming right from the Archbishop of Canterbury's office. So, what I found that out from a researcher in the Anglican Church, system coming to me with this information. So we can expect more and more of that thing as the obvious crimes are exposed at the top like this.
Yeah, I think they're going to close ranks, and it seems like there's the force of disclosure and revelation seems to be very strong now, as we have these big scandals coming out now in the TV, in the big TV companies, and also with the church. Now, the church is going to react sooner or later, and something very interesting happened on Sunday. The Pope decided to canonize a lady who was a Mohawk Indian. Did you hear about that?
Absolutely, and him doing that.
There is a connection? Do you think there's a connection with what you're doing?
Totally, because the site that we're digging, the first residential school graves ever to be unearthed by an independent investigation, is something we started a year ago. It's on Mohawk land. So naturally they have to look like the Mohawks have always loved the Catholic Church. Don't forget, when anyone is canonized, it means they did something of importance for the Church. Often it means they committed a crime, like John Paul II, who covered up the Vatican bank scandal. He gets turned into a saint. These native people who are canonized, like people in Hawaii and other places, they often had a history of helping, allow missionaries and helping destroy their own people. So it isn't a very honorable thing often, when you look into the history of these people. Yeah, it's important for people to realize, especially, who people are not familiar with this information. You don't get made a saint for being a good person. You get made a saint for helping the church, and the two are often not the same. And you can be a mass murderer and be made a saint. And the church often recruited people, didn't it? It often recruited people from native cultures all over the world to represent itself. They still do. The government and the churches rely on their native frontmen to shut down the story, to attack me and other people trying to get the truth out. A recent example of that, and I posted a letter about this, the Aboriginal People's Television Network in Canada is pretty much run by the government, but they have a few native frontmen in it. We call it redwashing. They make it look like native people are behind the government. But they ran a piece that was totally misrepresenting the dig that we were doing on Mohawk land. And, telling open lies about it, making it look like the Mohawks were against us. This is the kind of thing we're encountering more and more. They use their flunkies to discredit what we're doing as we get closer to the crime. Yeah, and don't be surprised, actually, if in the next, when this trial is underway, if hopefully it will get into the media, and the media will, the Vatican will probably release a statement saying, well, we love the Mohawks. We made a Mohawk a saint. We're not trying to kill them. We want to bring the word of Christ to them and things like that. So we can expect that, I think. Yeah, and I urge people who are listening for the first time to go to our site, hiddennolonger.com. You can look at what really went on in these so-called schools where half the children died. 50,000 kids died according to crimes defined as genocide under international law. Yet not one person's ever been brought to trial for any of those crimes. Yeah, and there's a film called Unrepentant, isn't there, that you can get on Google Video for free, and there's a link on your website. So what's the next step, Kevin? Are you're going to go ahead with the trial, and like you said, there's going to be is it a two-stage trial? Well, what it is, Ben, there's going to be the first 5 cases have to do with Canada and the Indian residential schools. That's the first round of cases that'll go until the new year. What we're doing is we're going to bring in a verdict, however the verdict goes, from 58 citizen jurors around the world, a panel of 5 judges, based mostly in the U.S. and Europe. And when the verdict comes out, we're going to say to the world, what kind of sentencing do you, the people yourselves, want? I mean, for example, in Ireland, they've said, we don't want the Catholic Church operating in our neighborhoods anymore unless they agree to 10 points, including defrocking known child-raping priests, bringing the church under more community control, that kind of thing, identifying where these children are buried so they can have a proper burial. I mean, that's kind of basic. So we're going to go through a process where we say, okay, this isn't just about a court decision. This is about reinventing our society, taking back these institutions from these criminal elements that are running it. So it's a long process. It's the first set of cases, and we're going to be also taking the evidence into other courts in other countries like Spain and get a verdict there so that arrest warrants can be issued. We're determined to see these people behind bars, those responsible. Right. Has anyone in any of the defendants' institutions come forward to provide a defense case? No, there were 32 public summonses issued last month to Joseph Ratzinger, the Pope, the Queen of England, God one, Archbishop of Canterbury, the Prime Minister of Canada. They all got summonses. Only one person responded. A researcher for this whitewash the government's done in Canada called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, a guy called John Malloy. He threatened to bring the police on our case for what he called harassing him, and he didn't deny any of the charges against him, including that he was helping to conceal crimes of genocide in Canada. But he did say that, or rather I said to him that in an email, that him doing that, going to the police, can be construed as being an attempt to obstruct justice, because this is a legitimate inquiry.
Yes, that's a good point.
And so I never heard back from him. It's just more hot air, from these people.
Yeah, well, I mean, if I was a part of one of these institutions and I received a summons like this and I knew I was innocent, I'd have nothing to lose by simply writing back, putting forward a defence case and going to court against. I'd be confident to go to court, wouldn't I?
Exactly, Ben. That's the point. In 20 years of doing this work, I've never been sued and brought to court by anybody, because I know the evidence is all on our side. Under law, them not responding is an admission of guilt. They are not contesting the charges against them.
That's
we know what
true.
That means under law, right?
Yep. In any other court, if you receive a summons and you've signed a form to say you've got it, and you don't turn up at court, then it goes ahead without you. It's as simple as that.
That's right. And in fact, that's why we're going ahead. As a matter of fact, though, to be fair, what we're going to do is look for somebody to represent the defendants. We're not going to just try them in absentia. We're going to say, okay, let them present the case, the arguments they make, and let them it be judged in the full light of day. So, the main argument they make is that it was kind of like the Nazi defense at Nuremberg, which is that they were operating under the laws of their land. Well, we know from the Nuremberg precedents that that's not a defense under international law anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a higher law, a higher morality when it comes to crimes against humanity.
Yeah, I mean, that must be a great job. You should imagine whoever gets that job, I envy them. They can phone up Rowan Williams and say, Archbishop, hello, I'm your solicitor. I'm representing you.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Imagine his face.
If anybody listening would like to take on the job or even call up the guy, I'd be curious. I know he retires at the end of December, so we've got to talk to him before then, I think.
Yeah, mind you, that's not even if he's retired. He's
exactly.
Okay, Kevin, I much appreciate you coming on the air, and that's a very interesting update. And what's more, we're going to have you back. We're going to have you back on as a main feature guest on the 27th of November, I believe.
Perfect. Well, that'd be great. We'll have a lot to discuss then, Ben. And I, again, in the spring, will be coming back to England. I'll be coming in one way or the other to England. So
brilliant.
We'll see what happens. Yeah,
that's absolutely brilliant. And what we'll do, I urge all the listeners to tune in on the 27th of November, and Kevin will have. He'll have the whole interview slot where he can give us the entire details of everything that's been going on. So, Kevin Annett, thank you very much for being on Hpanwo Radio.
Thank you, Ben, as always. I appreciate it.
Okay. Bye-bye then.
Bye for now.
And that was Kevin Annett on Hpanwo Radio talking about this very, very important issue, extremely important case. And I urge everyone to keep their eyes on what's going on with this. Help in any way you can. Just spread the word. Just tell people, or volunteer to be a citizen's juror or an advocate, or just let people know and tell everyone what's going on. Right, who is in the chat box tonight? Because I'm sure all listeners are aware that we have quite a healthy kind of community here. Because we have lots and lots of people who can. If you want to talk to us, you don't just have to listen. You can talk too. Join the chat box. Get an account in the chat box and then post in the chat box, which is on the criticalmassradio.co.uk site. Now we have Lisa, as always. Hi. Lisa says, can you ask Kevin what's the most important thing each one of us can do to get people to come out in support? Lisa, I'm sure there's plenty of advice actually on the Hidden No Longer website, on the hiddenfromhistory.org. There's a whole list of things anyone can do who'll be listening. It's a kind of thing that once enough people are involved in it, it'll get its own pace and it'll take off in a sort of domino style. This is what the whole meaning of this term critical mass. I think it's important for people to realise they're not on their own, and anything they do has an effect. I think that's the most important thing we've got to remember. Hello, Homebrew, and Paul is there, and Philip is up there too. That's nice. Hi guys, it's good to see you again. Now, if you don't fancy chatting in the chat box, you don't have to. I mean, there's other ways of communicating with me and with all the other hosts on Critical Mass Radio. Just go, and if you want to talk to me, then all you have to do is email me at hpanwo@criticalmassradio.co.uk. Alternatively, you could always join the Hpanwo forum, which is Hpanwo, H-P-A-N-W-O, forum, all one word, .freeforums.org. Right, space weather's going to come up next. Now, I normally do some news stories before space weather, but I'm going to have to do space weather first today because there's an awful lot to talk about, and I don't know how much time I'm going to get for the news story because we've got Ross Hemsworth coming on later, and we don't want to keep him waiting. I've actually got the solar flare graph open at the moment as we go on to air because of the amount of material that been coming up at the moment, which is going to affect this planet and it's going to affect us. So stay tuned for that. And that's coming up next.
Good day, public. We are anonymous. Operation Jubilee, 5th of November, 2012. Gather peacefully at the Parliament Building, London, to declare the true Jubilee. Cancel all debt, stop war, redistribute the land, and eliminate poverty.
It's time.
With enough faith, united together we can move a mountain. It's going to take all of us. We are all anonymous. It's time to stand up for yourself, your family and your country. Show up and count yourself in the 99% anonymous millions. There can be no forgiveness without true and full repentance. If you do not repent, we cannot forgive. We do not forget. Expect us.
Hpanwo Radio, space weather. Right, we've got an awful lot to go through today, but solar flares. Right, where do I begin with this? Now, as you know, if you're a regular listener, the sun has actually been quite quiet for the last couple of months, but this quiet period ended at the end of last week. What happened was there was a flare that went right to the top of the M range on Saturday evening, and there were 2 high C range flares on Sunday morning. There was another low M class flare again Saturday 9 p.m. and there's obviously a pattern I saw emerging, and this was when I checked and I looked up on the solar data, I saw that there's a sunspot called AR1598, and now whenever it faces the Earth, it erupts. Well, it's erupting all the time, but whenever it faces the Earth, the sensors and satellites immediately pick up data from it. What happened was there was another M-class flare on Monday night, and then I started taking attention because they were given a warning of a 60% chance of an X-class flare. That is a big one of the big ones. Now, I began noticing that even the baseline of activity was very high and very unstable. It was kind of weaving around right up in the lower C range, and it's still there now. As I said, I had the graph open today. And, guess what? I mean, this morning, we had an X-class flare for the first time since June. This was an X1. Now, that's the lowest range of X, but it's still very, very high. And the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration has released a statement. That is that Earth-orbiting satellites detected an X1 class solar flare at 0322 UT, GMT that is, and that's about 22 minutes past 4 this morning. It was from a big sunspot, the one I just told you about. Now, NASA's Solar Dynamics Observatory has recorded an extreme ultraviolet flash. The radiation from the flare has created waves of ionization in the upper atmosphere over Asia and Australia, and that was the daylit side of the Earth at the time. So if you live in that part of the world, it's possible you're experiencing high-frequency radio blackouts, especially at high latitudes, for instance, up in Japan and sort of in southern areas like New Zealand. Now, it's too soon to say, but this could release a coronal mass ejection into space. Now, when that happens and it hits the Earth, it has 2 effects. It interferes very, very badly with electrical and electronic equipment, and at a worst case, it can cause widespread blackouts, and it has done in the past. It also, but another nice effect is that it creates the aurora display in areas where you wouldn't normally get it. So you might get to see the aurora borealis if you're sort of in Britain, for instance, or in continental Europe, or even if you live in New Zealand or somewhere near the south, you get the aurora australis. So stay tuned for updates. I'll fill you in next week. But basically, there's flares everywhere. It's like an ABBA concert out there, I'll tell you. Right, phases of the moon. Right, we're dead on half tonight. It rises at 3:06 p.m. and it sets at 34 minutes past midnight, so there's plenty of time to observe it in the evening. assuming you have any clear skies, which is not very often at the moment. Sunrise, 7:43 a.m. Sunset, 5:51 p.m. in Midlands, England. Right, the sunspots. As I said, there's this AR-1598, this little troublesome little fella, which is sort of like weaving its way around the equator of the sun at the moment. It's I say troublesome little fellow. It's about 10 times the size of the Earth. So it looks small on the solar disk, but it's actually very big because the sun is so huge compared to the Earth, about 1 million times bigger than the Earth. There's a few more patches as well, clusters, and there's a few singletons nearby too. Needless to say, no spotless days at all. Geomagnetic storms. Now, as a result of all this activity, there's a 5% chance of activity in the middle latitudes, including a 1% minor chance, severe 1%. Now, in the high latitudes, that goes right up. There's a 15% chance of activity, 15% minor. So a minor storm is virtually certain, and the chance of a severe storm is 5%. So keep an eye out on that. Near-Earth asteroids. Right, on the 19th of October, an asteroid called 2012 UE came within just 2 lunar distances of the Earth, but luckily it was only 27 feet across. Now, yesterday, 2012 US-18 came even closer, 1.6 lunar distances, but that was just 20 feet across. Now, if these objects had struck the planet, they probably wouldn't have caused significant damage. And we've seen a lot of this lately. A few very late detected small asteroids coming close. The forecast is currently extended to the 29th of December, and we have a handful of sort of mile-plus size asteroids around, but they're all in sort of double-figure distances. One to watch out for, which may even be visible to the naked eye, is Tutatis, which is 1.6 miles across, and it's going to actually approach within 18 lunar distances on December the 12th. And I say visible to the naked eye, it might be a small spot, like a tiny star. Right, we've had some meteor showers because there's something called the Orionid meteor period at the moment. It's actually when the Earth passes through the tail of Halley's Comet. You get some very, very small, but very, very sort of sometimes very bright fragments that enter the Earth's atmosphere and can create quite a nice sort of like fireworks display of light. And if you look up into the sky for long enough, sooner or later you'll probably see one of them hit the atmosphere. You get a big streak of like a shooting star, as it's called. Now, there was quite a large one of these actually exploded over San Francisco Bay last Wednesday, just after the Hpanwo Radio Show last week, actually, and it caused a sonic boom, which shook houses, and it might even have scattered some pieces on the ground. So the meteorite experts actually went around interviewing people to try and triangulate exactly where it was, and as we speak, the meteorite hunters are out there looking for fragments. Solar wind speed is 229.2 miles per second. Density, that's gone up. It's gone up quite considerably. It's 0.1281 particles per cubic inch. So that's quite an increase on what we had before. Hpanwo Radio Space Weather.
CMR Critical Mass Radio is a completely non-profit station where the hosts pay to broadcast their shows. The mission of the station is to get as much information as possible out to people about the world we live in, to unite like-minded people, and to try to come up with workable solutions. If you agree with the work that we are doing, then please feel free to help us continue by making a donation on the webpage. CMR is for people who want answers, because now it is our turn.
Hpanwo Radio News. Right, ghostly goings on at an Oxford church. Now, this is actually something that happened to me personally last Friday night. I won't go into all the details because it will take too long, and I've actually recently uploaded a video to Hpanwo TV called St. Fried's Night, and if you watch that, you get all the details there. But basically, what happened was I received information on good authority that at a particular church in a suburb of Oxford, some ritual was going to go on and or paranormal activity. And I had pledged some time before that when that took place, I would go and investigate personally. So I decided to stick by my pledge and go and investigate. And I was a little bit nervous, actually, because I went up there not exactly sure what I was doing. And I actually I went and made a sort of like video, and I sent it to a few people, a little private video saying, I've got to do this thing. It could be a little bit risky. Could you please, just on the off chance that something happens to me, could you please spread this video around? I didn't take it that particularly seriously. It was just kind of precaution, contingency plan, you might say. Now, the reason why I thought something paranormal was going to happen at this church, I can't go into details now. It's all in the film St. Fried's Day. But basically, I headed up there. It was absolutely pitch dark. The location of this church is in a place called Binsey, which is like a tiny village. It's like a very, very tiny, remote, very, very well-preserved ancient village. And it's in the middle of Port Meadow, which is a large area of wilderness in Oxford. And when you went there, you'd think it was very remote, but it's actually within the city limits of Oxford. So it's like this little patch of oldie worldy kind of greenery and village within an hour's walk of Oxford city centre. And you can access it from a road, one little small road, and one pathway, which is up the side of the River Thames, or the Isis as we call it. So I actually got there. Now the ritual and paranormal activity was due to take place at midnight, or just before midnight. So I went to the church, and I got there a little bit early. Now, I wasn't going on my own. I mean, really didn't want to go on my own. So my friend Ellis Taylor actually got hold of one of his friends to come with me. So we both went up there, and we both basically hid in the bushes in the graveyard and waited. Now, other people who have been and they've observed this particular event, it's not actually certain what goes on, whether there are humans involved, whether there are people, some kind of secret society conducting a ritual, or paranormal activity in terms of ghostly activity. My guess was, and the guess of all the experts I spoke to about this, was it was a combination of both. Some kind of ritual going on plus paranormal activity probably connected to the ritual. So we waited and waited, and I had my camera with me. I was filming. I filmed all the interesting bits, and well, nothing happened. We didn't see any of the things we're supposed to see, like monks walking up the path and things like that. And I was a bit disappointed because after I'd sort of like hyped it up so much, I was thinking I'm going to have to go back and tell everyone nothing happened. It's going to be a huge anticlimax, and no one's ever going to trust me again or believe me again. But something did happen, actually. Something strange did happen. Just as we were basically packing up our stuff to go, I heard a sound in my ear, and you can actually, at the moment it happens, it's actually captured on the film. It's in part 6 of the film. The film is probably about an hour and 20 minutes long, and it's sort of in part 6, which is near the end. Nothing, I should say, no sound actually is captured by the microphone on the camera. Nothing appears on the film's soundtrack, but I distinctly heard a sound in my ear, which didn't come from any source like my friend speaking or anything else. This sound resembled a human voice. It didn't actually say any coherent words. It was just a single syllable. Well, that's all it was. It lasted a split second. It was as if someone had switched the radio on quickly and then switched it off again. But along with hearing this sound, I felt a disturbance of air by my ear, which I would feel if someone was standing by my shoulder speaking. The sound was very loud. It was very distinct, and I'm pretty certain it was a human voice. It was a woman or child's voice, but it didn't say anything coherent. And it was interesting because the voice actually appeared in my ear at the exact moment where I was turning to my friend, just after I turned to my companion and said, "Should we call it a night and go?" And then his voice appeared in my ear, which is really quite. It's obviously not as what I'd hoped for. I'd hoped to be able to film some sort of visual apparition, which I couldn't. But my guest Ross Hemsworth has been on many of these expeditions to try and locate evidence of ghosts, and it is not easy. It's not an easy thing to do in any way. It really is not. So I've just got a message from. I'll just tell Ross that I'm nearly ready. Right, just let him know. Now, so that's basically what happened. But I urge you all to go to Hpanwo TV on YouTube, or you can access it from the Hpanwo blog, and you'll find out some more about that. Right, petrol produced from air and water. Now, this is something I saw on the BBC a couple of days ago. Very, very strange thing, right? The actual story was entitled "Petrol Produced from Air and Water," and I thought, blimey, what's this? Is this Stanley Mayer's invention going to be broadcast on BBC now? Because Stanley Mayer was the man who invented the Mayer cell, which is basically it's a device which produces hydrogen with more energy than the electrical energy you put into it. So in other words, it's free energy. Now, the reporter, as soon as I watched it, I realised that's actually not the case. Now, the process looked very complicated. It's been developed at, I think it was Wolverhampton or somewhere, just in an industrial estate. And basically, the reporter didn't explain how it worked, and the man she interviewed didn't explain how it worked either. Now, and she said, "Oh, well, it sounds too good to be true. You know, you can get petrol from water and air. Blimey!" And this was the kind of way that the hydrogen-powered car was marketed. I don't know if you remember a few years ago, they brought out a hydrogen-powered car. And everyone was thinking, wow, this is amazing. But basically, it's important to understand, first of all, that the ingredients for conventional fossil fuels, the active ingredients, are present in things like air and water, because the active ingredients of petrol is simply hydrogen, oxygen, and carbon. And those things you can find very commonly in air and water. That's not free energy, and to extract those elements from air and water is actually very, very easy. You don't need any large hadron collider. It's electrolysis, which is schoolboy science. Anyone can do it. So what it means is, of course, you need electricity for the electrolysis, and the amount of energy you can extract from the elements you get from the electrolysis is not as much by far as the power you put in. So this is not an energy source. It is an energy storage system. So it's just this is important to realise. So you mustn't get it confused with things like Stanley Mayer's water-powered car and the Mayer cell and things like that. It's not like that at all. And the report does actually say that, but I can't help thinking that there may be some kind of ulterior motive involved. I'm not sure. I really am not sure. There's more news stories we're going to get to, but I think time has beaten us, so we're going to have to proceed. Now, I will try and the second news story I was going to bring up, I will try and bring up next week. So stay tuned for that. I will get back to you, so bear with me. Hpanwo Radio News. Right, in a moment, we're going to have Ross Hemsworth on to be interviewed. He's an author, he's a television and radio broadcaster, and a lecturer on conspiratorial and paranormal subjects. Now, he presented the TV series Ghost Detectives on Channel 4, and also Ghost Watch Live on the BBC. And later on, he presented Now That's Weird, a very, very long-running, very, very successful show, which I enjoyed very much. Today, he presents The Hammer Show, so he's a radio host, just like me. But first, I want to play a song. Now, this is a very, very interesting song because it's related to the guest we're about to have. I think Ross has actually visited the International UFO Congress in Laughlin, Nevada, USA. Now, it's something that I always wanted to do myself, and I always wanted to go, and I never did. And then basically the organisers sold the franchise to someone else, and they moved it to somewhere in Arizona. But the good news is apparently it's going back to Laughlin. So hopefully there's still a chance I could get there. Even without a passport, I can sort of like wet back the Mexican border like all the sort of like restaurant workers do. But I would love to go to this. But now Ross has spoken about his trip to Laughlin, Nevada, and the Congress, and he really, really liked it. But I'm going to play a song by another man who didn't like it so much. And this song, I think, if you listen to the lyrics, you'll realise it's actually about that. Now, the man, the song is actually by someone called Jonathan Downes, and regular Hpanwo fans will know who that is because he's the director of the Centre for Vortian Zoology. In other words, he's a cryptozoologist. He hunts down things like the Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot, all these unknown creatures. But he's also a musician, and a few years ago he had a band called John Downes and the Amphibians from Outer Space. And this is one of their songs, and I hope you like it. But in the meantime, stay where you are and don't touch your dials, because Ross Hemsworth is up next. Jonathan clearly got very disillusioned with ufology, and if you read his books and you go to the website, which has a link on the Hpanwo blog, you'll understand that. And now he concentrates on cryptozoology. But that's still a great song, and I still love it. And I think Jonathan is a very, very interesting guy. Hospital Porter's pride and dignity. Stop the New World Order. Welcome to Hpanwo Radio. Right, is the hammer ready? Let's just check. I'll see if I can get him add him to the conference call. Interestingly, I've often been a guest on his show, so we know each other quite well. So we role reversal. Hello, Ross.
Hello, how are you?
Ross Hemsworth, welcome to Hpanwo Radio. I'm very well, thanks. Are you well?
I'm great, thank you.
It's good to have you on the show. Because you're on my show for a change, so
yes, role reversal.
Yeah. So everyone is actually dying to this show. A lot of people said, "Great, you've got Ross Hemsworth on." So this is very much anticipated, and you've got a lot of fans in the chat box and listening to this evening. So you'll be glad to know you've got a lot of appreciation out there. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Yeah. Tell us a bit about yourself and where your background and how you got into this business.
Oh, by accident, really, Ben. I was running a production company, a TV production company in Bedfordshire, when a police officer walked into my office one day and said, "Mr. Hemsworth?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Mr. Ross Hemsworth?" I said, "Yes."
Dear. Ooh.
And he said, "I'd like to talk to you." And I thought, oh dear, what have I done? Speed camera? And he said, "No." He said, "I want to talk to you about ghosts and the paranormal." I said, "You what?" And it turned out that when he wasn't acting as a police officer, he was out on ghost hunts at night with his camera as a very keen photographer and paranormal researcher. And he wanted to pitch me with an idea for a ghost show, from which came Ghost Detectives. But before that, I'd gone on a couple of ghost hunts with him. And they were literally archaic. I mean, it was 4 people sitting on a floor with a camera and notepad waiting for Fred the ectoplasm to walk through the wall, shake their hand and say, "Hi, I'm Fred and I'm dead." And then, case done, they could go home. So
I tried that on Friday night. It doesn't work.
No. So we had to sort of bring it up to date a little. We invested in an awful lot of equipment. We set up what was then called the Phantom or Fraud Project, and that's how it all started, really.
Oh, that's pretty good, yeah. And you went on to, you presented these TV shows, which I watched along with Chris French, who is familiar to most listeners. I think I've talked a little bit about him. And there was also, what's the name of it? Was it Mia, the lady who's the medium?
No, Marion Goodfellow was
right.
She was the clairvoyant at the time. Her and Paul Hanrahan, and that was in the Ghost Detective series. But Chris French, they sort of dubbed him on the end, really. I didn't meet Chris until after we'd recorded everything, and we did some radio together. We actually got on really well. We had quite a laugh doing the radio. But he was edited in after we'd done the investigations, and it annoyed me a little bit because it didn't give us the chance to explain certain issues. For instance, we would have some incredible paranormal activity that actually happened in the venues. He would come along afterwards into the editing suite and say, "Oh, it was probably this or it was probably that." And that's how the shows would finish. They didn't give us a chance to come back and say, "No, well, it couldn't have been that because And that really irritated me. And unfortunately, that's the way TV tends to work, is that the skeptics get the final say, and the people that actually believe or that have got a fairly good case to argue for the paranormal tend not to.
Right, yeah, because I mean, I remember that it was obviously very, very well and very cleverly edited, because I remember very well thinking, Chris French is basically going along with you on your tour, and so that's quite crafty of them there.
Yeah, no, he didn't come along at all. The only one he ever actually attended was a completely different show called Haunted Halloween Live, which we did for ITV1 and 2. And we managed to get him out on that one, get him there to actually see what was happening and going on. But no, at these 6 Ghost Detectives venues, we never had Chris out. He was purely in the studio.
Yeah, I mean, now, I mean, I'm sure, like a lot of people, I watched the program Ghost Watch and had the sweet dry living excrement scared out of me, because this was obviously a work of fiction. It was a docudrama. Now, when I actually watched that, I remember thinking afterwards, wouldn't it be a good idea to do something like that for real? And I believe you did that, didn't you? You were involved in a program where you actually did a real Ghost Watch kind of thing.
Yes, it was a follow-up to that. It was run by BBC Worldwide. It was an internet broadcast rather than TV, although it ended up on TV after the event. But it was called Ghost Watch Tower of London, and we did 2 nights. We were the only paranormal team ever to have got invited in to spend nights over at the Tower of London. I don't know if anyone's done it since, but certainly at that time we were the only team. And it was an absolute honour to be in there and working. And lo and behold, Sir Cliff Richard bowled in at one point because they'd given him a guided tour. And of course, he wasn't into the paranormal at all because of his religious leanings. But he did come up and have a good chat to me, because I'd known him through something else, and was asking what we were doing and about the type of things that we thought we'd encountered. And it was an interesting one. So I sort of remember that more than I do the hunt itself, really.
Did he give you a song as well?
No.
Oh, sport. You think he could, didn't you?
Could have written him something special, just for that.
Yeah. Now, I think you and I met shortly after that, because we first encountered each other, I think, at the Probe conference, and that's why I purchased a copy of your book called The Dead Are Talking. Now, how did that come about, that book?
Well, the book was really the write-up of those few years, and I've been meaning to do the second book ever since, and I started writing it, but I've always got bogged down with other stuff. And quite recently, Richard Dolan, who's quite a well-known researcher you probably know in America, him and his partner Karen have approached me to actually publish the second book, which is I've sort of got the pressure on me now to get it done, so that's going to be good. But going back to The Dead Are Talking, it was really summing up not only the stuff that I'd encountered that took me on this roller coaster ride from skeptic to believer because of the stuff I'd encountered head on, but it also talked about the effect it had on my life. The last couple of years of my marriage before that split up. It also spoke about an affair I was having with one of the members of the team of Hpanwo Fraud during the last part of my marriage. So it sort of really did open the box and spoke about all kinds of aspects that were related to this period of my life that I went through, which wasn't an easy period, I have to say. There's a lot of things all going on at once.
It is a courageous piece of writing, actually. You do go into a lot of very personal issues, and but is it true? Is that book still in print, or is it not now?
It's not in print anymore, but there are still copies floating around on places like Amazon, and you can still get a few of them off my website at rosshemsworth.co.uk. I've got I think there's about 20 left in storage.
Yeah, I've got one somewhere. I don't think it's on my shelf at the moment, but it might be my brother's place in his car.
I heard tale that there is actually one copy somewhere on eBay, I think it was, that's not got my signature in it.
That's got to be worth a lot. An unsigned copy.
Fortune, Ben, isn't it?
Yeah, that's you. I remember some very, very interesting stories in that, because at one point you had a rather intimate encounter with a lady ghost at a hotel. Is that right?
That's right. Yes, that was up in the Lake District, up in northwest England. It was the Dalston Hall Hotel, and I'd gone up to do a recce. Now, for those of you that don't know what a recce is, it's when you're going to do some filming at a place. You normally go in first to suss out the area, look at the cable lengths you're going to need, how many cameras, mini cameras you're going to need, that sort of thing. And I'd asked them which was the most haunted room at the hotel, and if I remember rightly, it was room 4. So I said, "Can you book me in for there?" And they said, "Yes, fine." I said, "But don't tell me anything at all about the room." And when I'd gone into this room at night, I'd set everything up. I'd set a camera up in there and everything, just purely for my own benefit, really, to see if there was anything that I could capture there. And I went downstairs, had a couple of pints of Dutch courage at the bar, came back upstairs, got into the bed, and I hadn't been in bed very long when I suddenly felt this strange sensation of like a hand sliding up my leg and inner thigh. And it wasn't unpleasant, so I didn't stop it, but it was quite cold. And then all of a sudden it sort of went a little bit further, and I jumped out of bed, and I flicked all the lights on, and I went back to actually take the video back to see what had happened, and the video had switched itself off just before this incident. Now, normally speaking, if a video turns itself off, and bear in mind we were back in VHS at that time, if a video turns itself off, it won't turn itself back on. You have to restart it. But what this had done was turned itself off and then turned itself back on after the incident. So there was like continuous play but a piece missing. And I thought, this is really strange, because you see me come out the bathroom, you see me get into bed, but you don't see me jump out the bed. The next thing you see is me standing in front of the cameras, you know, messing around with the player, trying to get it back into reverse so I could have a look through. So it was really strange. There's a whole piece missing, and I always found that quite intriguing.
Very, because, I mean, maybe perhaps later in a little while, I mean, I want to talk about some other things first, but I want to sort of raise another subject with you about this, about how because these things seem to happen all the time in this kind of business.
I think the female ghost in that room wanted to raise something as well, but we won't go into that right now.
I'm afraid, yeah, maybe later in the evening on the late shows. But yeah, but it's an issue I want to sort of go into later. But just to sort of reiterate the kind of experiences we can have. I mean, I myself had a very, very interesting experience on Friday night. It wasn't what I expected, but it was still quite. I wouldn't say the word spectacular, but it was very, very interesting. When I went to a haunted church, which I've already described earlier in the show, but you know, you have also been to a spiritualist church like I have as well. Now, these have a very bad name, but you had an interesting experience at one of these.
Yes. Now, this was fascinating, because even now, sort of 10, 11 years on, I can't explain this at all. And just to give the listeners a sort of brief outline, a friend of mine had taken me to a spiritualist church in Colchester. I'd never been to one before, and at this point I was still very, very sceptical of mediums. I thought they were there just to take your money, con you out of a few quid, hence the name Phantom or Fraud. You know, we were looking to sort of unravel that particular section of the paranormal. And I'd gone there to see a medium called Brigg, who's from South Wales, and he was doing the podium thing there. Now, as I say, I'd never been into one of these places before, didn't really know what to expect, and he started to tell people the stuff around the audience. But throughout, I was looking over my shoulder, and there was a lady sitting at the back, and I kept looking at her. She must have thought I fancied her or something, because I just kept looking over my shoulder at her. And when Brigg finished, we walked up the aisle to meet him, and I was introduced to him, and he started to talk to me. Now, you know me, Ben. I'm not a rude person. If someone's talking to me, I don't just walk away. I'll always, you know, stand there and chat. And on this occasion, he'd asked me a question. I'd been talking to him for a while. He asked me a question, and I suddenly felt this hand on my shoulder spin me round and push me up the aisle. And at the same time, I heard a voice as clear as you're hearing me now, saying, "Quick, she's putting her coat on, she's leaving." And as I turned round, sure enough, she was putting her coat on, ready to go. The next thing I remember is I'm standing in front of her. I've completely walked away from poor old Brigg, who's still in mid-sentence. I'm walking up the aisle with my back to him. I've put my hand on her right shoulder. I've closed my eyes, and apparently, and I obviously don't remember exactly what I said, because this is what I was told afterwards, but apparently I told her that her friend had just died of cancer. I gave her a friend's name. I described her friend, absolutely 100% spot on. I said that the pair of you were going on holiday together because you hadn't expected her to be taken as quickly as she was, and she's showing me pyramids. Therefore, I believe you were going to Egypt, and the message for you is that you must go. You've been having a dilemma about this, but you must go. And I opened my eyes, not knowing what the hell had happened, and she's crying her eyes out. She's put her arms around me, she's hugged me, and she said, "I don't know who you are," she said, "but I've been coming to this church for 5 years, and I've never met such a gifted medium." She said, "Everything that you told me was 100% correct, and if my husband was here with me now, he'd shake your hand because he's been telling me for ages that I should still go." Well, imagine the effect on me. I didn't believe mediums were real. I didn't believe you could contact the dead, and I've just apparently done it. It was fascinating, Ben, I have to say. And to this day, I've never been able to explain that logically or rationally.
That is a remarkable tale, because you had I suppose, what could be described as a spontaneous medium-like experience.
Yeah, and I had quite a few afterwards. For about 2 years, I was doing that almost constantly, and it was as if the gift suddenly arrived and then was taken away just as quickly, almost as if whatever it was that provided it was providing it as evidence to me for my use only. And then when that use had come to an end, it was right, okay, now we want you to move on to other things. We're taking that back away from you.
Yeah, this is quite remarkable. Now, we're talking about the skeptics and things like that. You've already talked about the program you did on Channel 4, with the Ghost Detectives program with Chris French. Now, you're saying, like, on the TV often tends to emphasise the skeptic's point of view, and it sort of
Ghost
belittles
Detectives was UK Horizons, by the way, sorry.
UK, sorry, yeah. UK Horizons, okay, that's a correction. Now, do you think there's a reason for that, why that is the case? Because as you've often reiterated, there's plenty of evidence out there that indicates that these phenomena are real. So what do you think's going on?
Well, this can be split into two parts. Firstly, you've got Ofcom. Now, Ofcom, unfortunately, with television, make rules saying that if you do a show about religion or whatever, you can do it without anybody coming in and giving the other side of the story. But if you do something on the paranormal, you have to have a skeptic there saying why it's all a load of rubbish. And you also have to put up a sign that says this show's for entertainment purposes only, which I think is wrong. So the skeptic always gets the last say. But if I go back to me in 2001, I would argue with skeptics and I would give them a million reasons why they ought to believe. These days I don't. The way that I deal with it now is, well, if you haven't been there, you're not going to believe me. You've got to witness this stuff and experience it for yourself. You're not going to believe it from someone else who's seen it. I can tell you about millions of different entities and things that I've encountered, but it's never going to convince you to believe in them. So the skeptics can only believe by going and doing what I've done. And if they go along to ghost hunts and don't see anything, then, well, I'm sorry, I can't argue with that. That's your thing. It's obviously not happened for you, and that's it. But for me, I've had things happen to me, and I'm a rational and logical person, as you know, Ben. When I do my talks, 95% of everything I see I can find an explanation for that falls into rational and logical. It's that 5% I can't that goes in that little box we like to call paranormal. That's what fascinates me, that's what drives me on, and that's what keeps me going.
Yeah, me too, because, the paranormal is simply a word we use to describe these phenomena which we don't have a scientific explanation for yet. But,
exactly. It's just that we can't currently describe as normal.
Yeah, I've had some remarkable experiences myself. Like, for instance, I've seen spectral figures. It doesn't happen very commonly with me, but last Friday night was a rarity. But I've had spontaneous. I've gone into spontaneous kind of frames of mind when I'm sort of half asleep. It often happens, and I've seen a spectral figure on a train once when I was sort of dropping off to sleep on a train. Now, the skeptics, of course, would say, well, it's a dream, Ben. You're going off to sleep, so you're having a kind of hypnagogic experience.
Sleep paralysis, that's their favourite one, isn't it?
Sleep paralysis, yeah. Hypnagogic is when you're going off to sleep. Hypnopompic is when you're coming out of sleep. But the thing was, it's a long story, but I basically saw a spectral figure on a train once, which I was later able to confirm its identity as a formerly living human who had died.
Right.
So it was just quite remarkable. I think I was about 95% sure it is this person that I saw, who I didn't know, but someone else knew, and was able to show me a photograph, which is quite remarkable. Now, sometimes the obstinacy of some of the skeptics is quite amazing.
Well, there are certain skeptics, I think, if we go down the route of, say, Richard Wiseman, who are, and James Randi, who are cynical. They're not skeptical, they're cynical. I challenged Randi, as you know, some years ago. I put £100,000 on the table to a charity of his choice for him to come and spend 6 weeks in Britain. We offered to pay all his expenses, flights, hotels, everything, and said that if he wasn't convinced the paranormal existed at the end of those 6 weeks, I would write a cheque out for £100,000 to a charity of his choice. That was back in the days when I had money. And that was how convinced I was that we could show him. And he came back to me and said, you're probably right, but no thanks. Because he makes much more than that out of being a cynic. So why would he, it's ridiculous. And unfortunately, a lot of them are like that. Now, Chris French isn't. Chris, he actually said to me jokingly one day, he said, I'm the paper skeptic or something, I think he called himself. And he said that they just pay me a fee of sort of £750 and I'll go and waffle for 10 minutes. That's what I do. And when we got him on radio, the two of us were doing these ISDN radio things to promote ghost detectives. And we were in a studio in central London, and we were linking up to 20 or 30 different stations, one after the other, doing live radio. And at one point, he'd come up with the old serotonin-monotonin argument for near-death experiences. Well, I knew quite a lot about that because I'd had a very long meeting with Dr. Sam Parnia at Southampton General Hospital, comparing notes about our research. And I straight away ruled that out. And I'd got a big beaming smile on my face as I went to answer him. So he knew that I was going to strip him to pieces. And he just poked his tongue out and went, blah, blah, blah. Because he knew I'd got him. He knew he couldn't answer it. And he knew that I'd shot him down in flames. But he took it in good humour. And that's the way it should be. You know, he knew that he was coming out with the standard scientific argument. And it doesn't stand up. You can't get millions of people around the world having the same damned illusion. You know, it just can't happen. So, I mean, some of these things are quite funny. And also, I had a radio interview on... I think it was Three Counties Radio, with the Bishop of St Albans as one of the guests, and he was saying about what I was doing was wrong, and Christians don't believe that you should get involved with the paranormal, and it's all familiar spirits. And I listened to everything he had to say, and I said, well, look, I consider myself as a parascience person rather than a paranormal person. I said, all I'm trying to do is get some facts and figures, if you like, behind this weird, unknown area of science. And I said, let me ask you 3 questions, if I may. And he said, well, by all means. I said, do you believe that when we die, a part of us lives on? He said, yes, I do. I said, do you believe that leaves the body at the point of death and the body becomes a shell? He said, yes, I do. I said, and do you believe it passes on to somewhere else? And he said, yes, I do. I said, all I'm trying to do then is prove what you already believe. I said, what are we arguing about? And he said, oh, yes, but religion's built on faith. You can't know it for sure. You have to have faith. That's what it's built on. And I thought, well, in that case, science would never be allowed to prove it, would it? Because science is about proof, not faith.
Yeah, well, I'm not a Christian, but you could ask him, a good response to that would be, well, why did God give us a brain like this to use and then tells us not to use it?
Well, the strange thing is, you see, the brain fights the mind, doesn't it? If you're a researcher that's done what I've done over the last few years, you get to believe that the mind is something different. The brain is like your hard drive, if you like, of the human computer, whereas the mind is the internet connection that allows you to go outside of the box and think beyond the norm. And when they gave us a brain, the brain actually argues with that internet connection on a regular basis, which is why you have this sort of left side, right side thing. If you watch, for instance, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, the very first thought that comes into your head will be, oh, it's D, for instance. Yeah. And then your brain clicks in and goes, well, actually, no, I think it's C. And then you have this sort of mini argument with yourself. You go with C, and of course the answer was what you thought first, which is D, which was that gut instinct reaction that comes from the soul, the mind, rather than from the brain.
That's it. It's always a good idea to trust these little hunches, because they're more often than not they're proved correct, and that can be. I find that in any aspect of my life. Even for instance, playing pool or snooker, I used to find that if I played the shot when it felt right, it would go. It would go to pocket.
Absolutely.
If I didn't, it would. If I tried to sort of like calculate it, it would mess up. You know, so it's an interesting. That's an interesting way of looking at it. Now, as far as Christians go, I will move on in a moment, but I'd just like to say, you know, that as far as Christians and paranormal investigation goes, there's a guy called Rupert Sheldrake, I think you probably have heard of.
Yes.
You know, he's actually a Christian. He goes to church. He goes to an Anglican church, and he investigates the paranormal. And what's more, in a few weeks, I hope to interview an Orthodox rabbi.
That'd be good.
He was an Orthodox rabbi in every sense of the word, but he's also interested in paranormal investigation and the DMT in the brain and things like that. And
well, you've only got to look at the Reverend Lionel Fanthorpe, who I'm going to be talking to after you, funnily, this evening. And Lionel is not only an Anglican priest, but he's also ordained as the head of the Knights Templar. He's also a member of ASAP. He's a well-known UFO and paranormal investigator, and he brings the two things very nicely together. And I think it can be done. And I think religion needs to catch up a little bit and say, well, look, we've got to have our minds open to this stuff.
Exactly. It doesn't have to be a conflict between. It can be. People. It seems people can very, very easily reconcile these two things.
Absolutely right.
So, well, say hello to Lionel from me, because I think that guy's brilliant. You know, he's
very knowledgeable man.
Yeah, I think he's the nearest thing Britain has to Robert Anton Wilson, actually. in terms of his style and things like that. Anyway, now I actually did an entire program about skeptics a few weeks ago. It's program 5, if listeners want to go to the archive list, where I discussed this. And I made the point that I tried to distinguish skeptics with a K between skeptics with a C. Now, to explain a bit more about what that is, you can listen to the program. But basically, skeptics with a C is basically people like what I consider myself to be and what you consider yourself to be. That is people who go according to evidence. Now, the skeptics themselves describe themselves that way, but they don't necessarily adhere to that. They're more like it's more a kind of cultural phenomenon than anything to do with science per se, because there are plenty of people who use science and don't agree with the skeptics, and they're called believers. Where there are people who sort of say, well, there ain't no such things as ghosts and UFOs. It's all in your head, isn't it? Right? Those people who know absolutely nothing about science and never use its methods. They're called skeptics.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, we get certain people. I mean, I love Stephen Fry. I think he's a lovely guy. I think he's a great TV presenter. But he comes out with some such rubbish in these statements, because he was on QI a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if it was a repeat I was watching, but he said anyone who believes in ghosts and an afterlife and life after death are complete nutters. And, of course, his audience claps and applauds because Stephen said it must be right. But what an outrageous statement to make. He can't prove that any more than I can prove beyond all doubt that it does exist. So for somebody that intelligent to get up there and make a statement like that in front of a TV audience, he needs slapping down for that. He needs someone to physically challenge that and say, Stephen, you have no right to say that. You have no evidence to say it doesn't exist any more than I have to say it does.
He should stick to doing comedy because he's very good at that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now, as a sort of social phenomenon, it's a very interesting point to analyse the skeptic movement in that way. So the skeptic movement is more cultural and social phenomenon than scientific. But as for the paranormal phenomena themselves, now you were talking about the incident in the hotel room with the randy lady ghost who tried to touch you up. You know.
Well, I hope it was a lady ghost.
You never know. You never know.
Could be big trouble there.
Yeah, well, there's no way of telling. You just have to hope for the best, mate.
Absolutely.
But now there was this very, very strange occurrence where the videotape stopped at just the moment when you wanted it to keep working.
Yeah.
And and this is not uncommon. I've known many people say similar things. They say the camera stopped at just the moment where I need it to be going, or damn it, the whole paraphernalia died. Or damn, my friend walked out of the room just when this thing appeared. Or that specimen I got of the Bigfoot hair, went missing. And this seems to happen all the time. Now, Jonathan Downes, who wrote that brilliant song we listened to earlier on, now he called that something called the psychic backlash. Now, I don't know if he was aware or not. You might be aware that a researcher from much long ago, I mean, many years before then, described something called the cosmic nanny. And this is a man who I consider a genius, Lyle Watson. Have you heard of Lyle Watson's theory of the cosmic nanny?
Yeah. I've heard it called many different things. He called it the cosmic nanny. Somebody else calls it the cosmic joke. Somebody else calls it the universal mischief. But it all amounts to much the same thing. It's either a case of somebody guarding the secret, or it's someone misleading you to take you away from the secret, depending on whether they want you to know or don't want you to know. And that's the theory behind it, I believe. Yeah,
because I mean, it's really, really very, very frustrating when you experience something which you know is real and you can prove to yourself it's real, and you gather the evidence which the moment you showed that to somebody else, you've got it, and then something goes wrong, that evidence vanishes. Lyle Watson talked about how he managed to, I think it was in one of his books, he talks about how he manages to pick up some ectoplasm or something, and he sent it off and it goes missing in the post and stuff like this. Brian Allen, there's the famous case of the disappearing videotape that Brian Allen talked about in his interview in program 4, I think it was program 6 of Hpanwo Radio. Now, but the thing about it is, if that's true, it means that there's some kind of force in the universe which when you consider it would need an awful lot of ability to achieve this. That is somehow preventing these phenomena coming out. Now, the skeptics will say, well, that's a cop-out. You're just making it out because the evidence doesn't exist. But it's not.
No, absolutely right.
No, I
we see the skeptics love to have something like this because they say, well, that was convenient, wasn't it? You don't have the video. Yes, that's convenient. But you see, these things do actually happen because you have to start thinking outside the box. Let's just take for a second, if somebody has a haunting in their house and they call me and they say, look, we need you to come around and have a look at this because there's something going on here. First thing I say to them is, have you asked it to stop? Well, no. Well, can you try that first? Because when you actually ask them to stop, 9 times out of 10, they do, as if they're governed by some kind of universal rule. You tell them to stop, you're forceful about it, they have to stop. Now, why is that? You know, if you're a ghost and you're haunting somebody, why should you just stop when you're asked to? There must be something governing that process to allow that to happen. And, of course, the skeptics will just say, well, it's your own mind. You've cleared your mind. You've allowed yourself to believe that it's going to stop, and therefore it does. Therefore, that proves even further that it's in your mind. So you can argue it on both sides and both ways, but I've witnessed this over and over and over again where you've told something to stop, and it has, and quite often in front of a number of different people. So in that case, they're all having the same mind problem.
It's actually, it's absolutely. I mean, I've experienced something similar. I mean, I'm not as serious as researcher as you are, and I've been on a few of these operations, but I have experienced similar things. And I mean, all I can say is, if you are a paranormal investigator and you gather some piece of evidence and you want to send it to a laboratory, just send it by recorded delivery, send it by special delivery, because at least you can make some money out of it when it goes missing.
Yeah,
because it will go
make
missing.
A copy.
It will go missing.
Yeah, absolutely right. If you've got something that's the Holy Grail, then you can be pretty sure you won't see it again, that's for sure. Yeah. You know, for some reason, these things do have a habit of disappearing, and we don't really know why. We don't know whether it's conspiracies, cover-ups, or whether it's the universal rule. I don't know. But so, yes, absolutely, make a copy.
It cannot be. I mean, it's so prevalent, so wide-reaching. It happens to so many different people in so many different circumstances. It can't be human action. It must be. It can't be just some big. I mean, I think there are conspiracies associated with paranormal investigation, but not this big. It's something in this universe that is saying, you know, you're not ready to know about this yet, and I can't let you prove it.
No, that's right.
I can't let you prove it scientifically.
There are so many theories doing the rounds at the moment with regards to what actually is going on out there. And I think one of the favourites, and as you know, you saw one of my recent presentations in London, I favour the interdimensional theory in that we are all part of a series of different dimensions. Now, I'm not religious either, but if we took the Bible as being a book of Proverbs, for instance, then in my Father's house there are many mansions, could be talking about these multiple universes sitting next to each other. And quite often what we're seeing, whether we're seeing a UFO, let's take UFOs for a second. Instead of travelling millions of miles at light speed across galaxies, how about if it was actually right next door to us and was just coming through some kind of wafer-thin barrier, and it's not visible to radar? That would explain why amateur astronomers and radar are not picking up these things a lot of the time, and yet you or I might see them from the ground. Likewise with ghosts. Maybe it's not always dead people. Maybe it's people that are very much alive, and we're appearing as the ghosts in their dimension. So I think we have to have our minds open to things that are way, way outside the box, Ben. Yeah, exactly. And also, I mean, this is very interesting you brought this up, because I've discussed in this program before with other guests that as far as UFOs go, and I actually wrote this in my report on the Before conference, the extraterrestrial hypothesis, the classic extraterrestrial hypothesis, is actually very much an assumption. There's very little actual evidence to say that it's true. I mean, and the biggest argument against UFOs being real is, well, how do they fly so far? Well, maybe they don't. As with ghosts, I mean, like, I was a hospital porter for 23 years, and hospitals are an absolute hotbed for paranormal activity. And there's a guy in America called Dr. Mitchell Gibson, who's a very interesting guy. He's a doctor who has actually encountered ghosts or paranormal phenomena while he was working in a hospital, being a doctor, and he became a paranormal researcher and a spiritual researcher as a result. But I mean, you know, this very often you see there's a lot of myths. For instance, some ghosts, you know, you don't just see ghosts of dead people. You can sometimes see ghosts of living people. Yeah, absolutely. You know, and if I can just go a step back there, and let's talk about doctors and nurses for a moment, because as you know, having worked in a hospital, there is an awful lot of doctors and nurses who won't go on the public record because of their career, but that have opened windows for orbs leaving the body at the point of death, doctors who know that there's this ball of light that leaves both pets and people at the point of death. They've seen it in vet surgeries. many, many nurses and doctors have actually seen with their own eyes this glowing ball of light leaving a body at the point of death. Now, if we could get some of those people to actually come forward and say, okay, I'm willing to go on camera and talk about this, I think of the body of evidence there is sitting there in hotels and veterinary surgeries across the world that have actually all seen the same thing.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, watch your space, Ross, because, I mean, I'm still in touch with a few nurses. I could ask them, because they do talk about it privately in the pub afterwards. They won't go on record, like you say, but, I mean, there's discussions afterwards which have amazed me. There was an incident at my hospital, actually, a few years ago, in which the nurses in this area called the Clinical Decisions Unit, which is like a little side ward in the emergency department, they ran out there screaming. It was just after I'd gone off duty, and they'd seen a full-scale apparition, a humanoid apparition in the middle of the ward. Now, no reports filed. There was no incident form filled in. Nothing. I mean, the staff there seemed to take it in their stride. What happened was they just went back there a few minutes later. The apparition had gone, and they just got on with their duties. So a lot of, it's amazing people do take these things in their stride. They really do.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think you have to in a job like that, because nobody's going to take you seriously. If you're one nurse or even two going to your boss and saying, look, we've seen this ghost walking through here, we saw this full body entity, straight away their career is going to be in jeopardy, because they're going to take the scientific viewpoint. These things don't exist. These people are of a strange mental disposition and probably not fit to work in that job. So therefore, they're not going to put that at risk.
Yeah, exactly. Members of the management who've never touched a patient in their life and never seen a drop of blood in their life except their own when they prick their finger will turn to these people. I get angry about this.
Even then they faint.
Exactly. They turn to these people who have been there and done it, and they know they've been on the front line, and they say, "Oh, you're nuts." I mean, Samantha Lawton, a guest on this program, I think in program 12, she's experienced this as well, and she experienced losing her job over this. It's not a wise career move, and it's another reason why I think it's the truth about this is not coming out, is because society, whether by accident or deliberation or by deliberate action, exists in a state which is not ready to accept this yet.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I can tell you one thing that the listeners can do, and they can do it straight away. They can do it this week. That's, if you believe, don't believe, on the fence, go into your local pub and start a conversation with the barmaid or the barman about something that you've seen or something you've believed. Even if you make it up, just say, oh, it's something in my house. Could have sworn it was a ghost. It was doing this. It was doing that. I guarantee by the end of the evening, you'll have a dozen people around you all telling you their experiences as well. Can all of these people be wrong in what they've seen? Can they all be hallucinating? I think probably not. There's so many people out there that have had experiences they won't talk about normally, but in a pub over a pint, they'll relay theirs to you because it's such a fascinating subject, and because you've had an experience, they see you as kin. They see you as someone that they can relate to. Therefore, they'll pour their heart open. Happens to me all the time.
Yeah, me too. People will. If they know you, you'll take. They won't talk unless they know you're going to take them seriously, because they know that what they're saying is so far out from conventional wisdom. And there was a girl, one of the cleaners at my hospital, related this on the show and on the blog and on her Hpanwo TV, who came to me. I'd known her for years, but when I started talking about UFOs one day, she came to me and related her own UFO sighting to me, and she hadn't told anyone else.
No, but she did to you.
Yep, she did, because she knew I was going to take her seriously.
Yeah, you see, people's barrier comes down at that point, and they will start to share with you their experiences. And I've built up files and files of these sort of things from different people, and I've started to liken the experiences, i.e., how come this is happening at each time? How come they see that? Why is it connected to that? And when you start to put it together, you rule out the coincidence factor, and you rule out the scientific triple-blind test, because this is a million-blind test. This is so many things happening over and over and over again. But before we go any further, Ben, can I ask for a favour? Can I ask for a quick shameless plug? Because next year I'm taking this out on tour.
Yeah, sure.
I'm going around theatres all over the UK and hopefully the world to talk to people about the experiences I've had and what took me on this roller coaster ride. And it's a 3-part show. It's partly showing video and photographs and me talking about the paranormal and the experiences, partly a bit of what I call sit-down comedy, because I can't be asked to stand up and do it, and a little bit of the moaning old git in there as well.
Oh, that'll be great.
So It's a good show. It's a couple of hours of real fun and an evening, a chance for them to get out, meet me, ask their own questions, participate in what we're doing, and we'll have some fun along the way. So what I want people to do is if they've got a theatre or an arts centre near them, suggest it to me. Say, hey, I'd love to see you in this place. And you can contact me through rosshemsworth.co.uk, because the more theatres and arts centres we can get taking this show, the more I can get out amongst the people and spread the word of what I've been doing.
Well, it sounds like a brilliant idea, and I can think of a few places in Oxford I could sort of like go along and try and see if I can get you in there.
Fabulous.
Yeah, so now in your life at the moment, I know you're training to be a solicitor among all the other things.
Hopefully a barrister. I went to a barrister presentation at the Inner Temple last week, and I've decided I want to go into the bar, so that's going to be fun.
Oh, brilliant. I go to bars all the time, usually order a short one, you know. But
yeah, exactly. They're the sort of bars I've always frequented up until now, but this is a different kind of bar, and it pays quite well, apparently.
But did you had an exam? Did that go well?
I think so. I won't know until December. I get my results through about a week before Christmas, so I've got a bit of a wait now, but I think it went okay and hopefully done enough to pass, so fingers crossed. Yeah,
fingers crossed. I mean, law is a fascinating subject. Many people on CMR, many of the hosts and listeners are interested in the law and things like that. But are you writing any more books or anything like that?
Yeah, as I said earlier, I'm writing something now for Richard and Karen Dolan with their publishing company in America. So we're hoping to get that out in time for the tour, and also
that's
for
Keyhole. Is it Keyhole Press?
I think it is. I can't remember the name of it. I was trying to think earlier.
It's very good, though. It's a very good house.
Yeah, and they're brilliant people. I mean, Karen, bless her, well, both of them, I met through UFO Congress in Laughlin, because, as you know, I was a director of that until it was sold to another company. And we had such a good time with those people out there, and Karen and Richard are really genuine, nice people. So it's good to be able to do something with people you know, you trust, and they're putting a bit of pressure on me to get the thing done, and obviously that's good for me because it means I've got to sit down now and get working on it. And my last book, although it was 10 years worth of sort of evidence, I managed to write it in about 2 months, because once I actually get down and knuckle down, I actually type quite quickly, so hopefully we'll have this delivered to them before Christmas.
Oh, good. We'll look forward to that. Now, we're almost at the end of the interview now, Ross, but now you've already talked about your theatre tour coming soon, but now you also have a radio show, don't you?
I do indeed, yes. Well, of course, I was doing Now That's Weird for 5 years, which was a 3-hour show very similar to what you're doing now, and that started back in 2005. And went on until 2010. Then it got picked up as a TV show on Edge Media, as you know, and that's still being repeated now as well. But I'm now doing the mid-morning show, 3 hours a day from 10 till 1 on West Country Radio. So if people want to hear me with some inane banter in the mornings and some good music, that's where you find me.
Oh, that's good. Well, bear that in mind, because I remember you started out. I remember I first listened to your show actually on Glastonbury Radio. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do indeed, yes.
God, that's going back a few years, isn't it?
Well, I set up Glastonbury Radio in 2007, and then somebody else took over the reins in 2010, and I went on to pastures new at that point. And of course, I'm involved now with West Country Radio set up, and been doing quite a bit with them. It's a non-for-profit organisation set up to promote the West Country, the southwest of England. So it's trying to do a job of promoting the attractions, the events of the West Country, and telling people whether they should come and visit us down here, really.
Right, yeah. Well, I mean, that's really great. I mean, I remember that wonderful conference you did in 2008. I'll never forget that.
The Now That's Weird conference in Glasgow. Yeah, it was good.
And it was just a one-off, but it was great. It was absolutely brilliant. I've never.
Everybody seemed to enjoy it. They said it was one of the best conferences they'd ever been to, so it was really nice. But I think we got out at the right time before, because after that there was an awful lot of conferences coming up, all with similar names. They're all trying to do the same thing, and people couldn't afford to go to them all. So it became a really tough time for conferences, and it has been really ever since. And the recession obviously hasn't helped. So I think we got out at the right time of the conference side of things.
Definitely. I mean, I'm certainly found that in my own life. Luckily, some conferences have come up that have been close and cheap, so I've been able to go to those. But right, we're going to have to leave it, Ross. But your website is what's your website called?
www.rosshemsworth.co.uk.
Well, that's easy to remember. Well, Ross, thanks very much for being on Hpanwo Radio. We'll have you back again sometimes, because there's always news coming from you, I know.
Oh, yeah, and there's a lot we haven't talked about tonight.
That's right. I mean, we did so much we'd like
to, Ben, and it's lovely talking to you, as always.
You too, mate, yeah, and hope to see you again soon.
Likewise.
Take it easy.
And you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.
And that is the end of Programme 18. We're coming up to the end of our 18th show. I want to thank everyone for listening, everyone at the CMR, in the CMR community, and also listeners from Plymouth, Kingston upon Thames. Is that Richard? I wonder. Who's Richard Wright? Who's the last guest I had before last? Gillingham in Kent, Pencader, Wales, Hull, and someone from Ireland tuned in as well, and also Mutzen's Basel Landschaft in Switzerland. We've had no one from Australia. Obviously, the Jungle Surfer is asleep again. Future guests coming up on Hpanwo Radio include David Shaler, Neil Sanders, Steve Butler, Anthony Peake, Kathy Morgan, and many, many more. We're going to have Kevin Annett back on again, like I said, on the 27th of November. Paul Rippon and Andy is up next with the Unpenned Show. And this week they have the fascinating, the enigmatic, and the amazing Michael Tsarian. If you haven't heard with him, then you've not been in this business long, I'll tell you. We're going to play out with a lovely song by Gareth Icke. If you remember Gareth, I played several of his songs. He's a really good singer and songwriter from the Isle of Wight. He's also a guitarist. And Eromenos Media, a record label from Manchester, has just released his new album called A Brand New Battle. And it's very, very good, worth listening to. Gareth has brought out many very acclaimed singles like Feels Like a Race and What's Love Without Meaning, which was actually launched in Programme 6 of Hpanwo Radio. And if the name Ike is familiar, then that's because his father is indeed our Dave. And Gareth is going to be performing next Saturday at his father's show at the Wembley Arena in London. Now, I'm going to go to that. Next time I'm on Hpanwo Radio, I'll be able to give you a blow-by-blow account of the live David Icke show at the Wembley Arena in London, something I've been looking forward to. A live David Icke show really is one of the highlights of my life, so I'll have an awful lot to say about that. So, and if any of you are going, I hope to meet you there. So come up and introduce yourself, and we'll have a chat. It'd be great. So in the meantime, I want you to enjoy the rest of your evening. Good night. God bless.